Since 2015, being a Star Wars fan has kind of really sucked. And why do I say this? Well, because we get new movies, but the discourse surrounding the movies is really annoying. Basically, no matter what happens, someone has a complaint. That complaint is, because it's contrarian, it blows up and gets really popular. With Episode 7, everyone said this is just a remake of A New Hope. Therefore, it's bad. South Park said this joke. Pretty much everyone was saying this joke. And most people didn't care because it was a new Star Wars movie and it was pretty good. And it was the first in a trilogy. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the fact it was basically like episode 4. In fact, I mean, most people, I think, basically most people were okay with that. Because they knew eventually it would be different and unique and new for itself. And episode 8 was kind of the delivery of that. Episode 8 was the way more unique movie, and episode 8 is kind of like this really good standalone film, mainly because it has a really cool message at the end, which is basically saying, like, anyone can be a Jedi. That's why the little boy at the end grabs a broom with the Force, and that was kind of cool because as a viewer at home, you can be like, yeah, I could be a Jedi too. And then episode 9 is just like, for me, it wrapped up a lot of everything they did correctly. Everything kind of checks out and makes sense. The only thing that's kind of weird is that Palpatine's just kind of back, and they're just kind of like, well, dark side powers. And to be fair, I mean, there's so many other things in the Disney trilogy that basically is just where they say, yeah, there's a new force power, and it does that. So yeah, like in episode 8, why do Rey and why do Rey and Kylo Ren have like a meld thing where they're linked by their force powers? It's a force. It can do that apparently. Like, that's just kind of how this new Disney trilogy is, and it doesn't bug me. It kind of intrigues me, but it does kind of like, it intrigues me because it kind of stretches out the limitations of the force and make the force do a lot of different things. But it does kind of make some of the older media weird because the older media is very afraid to do new force stuff, and yeah. So either way, see, I like all three movies for various reasons, but a lot of people are trying to make this new episode 9 into this battle between I want to say episode 8 and 9, but really I watched some people talking about it, and it's a battle between episode 7 and 9 versus episode 8, because it's a battle between J.J. Abrams versus Rian Johnson. I even will hear people say episode 8 is better because Rian Johnson is a better director, because Looper and Knives Out are way better than anything J.J. Abrams has ever made. And it's like, this is weird because we're not even talking about the movies, man. And also, it's just, to me, it's a toxic conversation and one that's not very healthy, and this is why it's just not fun to watch these movies. So again, when episode 7 came out, everyone complained that it was just a remake of A New Hope. And then when episode 8 came out, everyone complained that Rian Johnson was trying to subvert our expectations by not giving us anything at all versus giving us something. That was the big joke, was that you all expected to, get some plot twists. And I'm here to say you get no plot twists. That's the plot twist. And it's like, okay, well, that's actually saying nothing. You did nothing. Okay. And some people are like, oh, but isn't it cool because it subverts your expectations? It's like, you're not really that clever as you think. Like, it's so blatantly obvious. Like, everyone knows what you're going for. It's not that we misunderstand what you're going for. It's just that it's kind of annoying and it doesn't really serve the plot much. And so my whole complaint with episode 8 is this: that when I watch episode 7, I can get really immersed into the story because I can pretend I'm either Rey or Finn. I can pretend I'm one of the characters along the adventure, or I'm a character in the Star Wars world, and what I would be if I had the Force, if I didn't have the Force, or if I was like a bounty hunter because I grew up on the Outer Rim or something. Like, you can pretend where you fit in the Star Wars universe. Now, episode 8's whole main plot was that anyone can be a Jedi, anyone can have the Force, and it doesn't matter who your heritage is. But when I watch the movie, I can't pretend I'm in the movie. I can't immerse myself in the movie. I can't dream about the world of Star Wars, because when I watch episode 8, all I can think about is Ryan Johnson sitting right in front of me and saying, "Yeah, but this isn't just any old Star Wars movie. This Star Wars movie is different in every way. In this Star Wars movie, there is no time skip. It picks up right after Episode 7. Isn't that neat? Oh, and also, no one says, I got a bad feeling about this, unless you count BB-8. Ha ha ha. Oh. Also, the cocky hotshot characters like Luke and Han Solo, they're actually bad now because Poe's like them and Poe's wrong, even though that whole subplot is kind of annoying because it doesn't really make much sense why they're being mean to Poe and not telling him the what he needs to know. Thankfully, Episode 9 kind of made Poe more obnoxious, kind of made Poe into more of an asshole. Actually, you guys should be thanking Episode 9 for writing Poe to fit in line with his character arc in Episode 8, where he's kind of like a cocky hotshot character. And literally, when Episode 8 came up, I was just like confused. I was like, why is everyone being so mean to Poe? Like, this makes no sense at all. Now it kind of makes more sense because of Episode 9. So, again, to me, I think these movies actually flow together perfectly well. A lot of people are saying, yeah, but the Disney trilogy, nothing flows together. It's just a mess because these two directors were fighting with each other the whole time. That's bullshit to me. I think Ryan Johnson took what Abrams did and made a sequel based off his work, but kind of went into his own side story direction. So Episode 8 is kind of like this standout movie that does its own thing, and I really like that movie. However, it's just it takes forever to get to the good parts. The bad parts are everything involving everything involving Finn and Rose. Those scenes are just terrible. They're so annoying. But to be fair, Rose as a character is kind of trying to teach Finn a lesson, right? And it kind of feels like this would be a side plot of a TV show. In a TV show, there could be a whole episode that's kind of like a filler episode where Finn would hang out with a new character. This would be Rose, and they would banter, blah, blah, blah. But most of the story would be kind of exploring Rose's backstory. And then in the climax, Rose would kind of teach Finn a lesson, which is what happened in the movie. The problem is that because this movie is 2 hours and 30 minutes long, it's really, really annoying. And it also just kind of like, we only get 3 movies, and basically all the fans of Finn get nothing now because Rose needs the time to shine. And that's kind of annoying. It's like Rose could have been done a little bit better, but also the scenes involving them don't do those characters any justice. I mean, those scenes are the most boring, pointless scenes in the movie. Now, the thing is that this movie's trying to tell you a message, which is not just about anyone can be a Jedi, but it's also trying to tell you a moral about heroism. That's the main theme of the movie. Poe has to learn from Leia about what it means to be a hero. Finn has to learn from Rose about what it means to be a hero. And Luke, interestingly, because even though he's a Jedi Master, he's kind of stumbled and lost his way. He needs to learn what it means to be a hero, and he gets inspired by a new young pupil, which is Rey. So everyone kind of learns what it means to be a hero. Rey kind of does too in this movie. So everyone kind of learns this message, this story of, this, what it means to be a hero and what it means to fail. And so what happens is there's a lot of failures in this movie. Luke has a big failure at one point. Poe, his plan is... To be fair, I don't think the writing is that great in Episode 8. So Poe Poe fails his mission, and so Holdo and Leia have to teach him a lesson. But really, in my opinion, it's kind of done so over the top and so on the nose. It's kind of annoying. It seems like the plot happened that way just to get this message in, and it really is not the best writing. And the scenes involving Poe suffer from it. And so basically every scene involving every character except for Rey, Luke, and Kylo is not very interesting, and it's pretty boring. And because the scenes are about failure, it feels like they served no purpose and they went nowhere. So what I'm saying is that Episode 8 is just not the most fun movie, and that's okay as long as it's like really smart. But because it's written so sloppily, and because things don't add up and make any sense at all, like the whole slow chase battle between the entirety of the Resistance and the First Order fleet going to kill the rest of the Resistance, because that scene, like, that just already makes like no sense, but I guess it's kind of easy to ignore that stuff in Star Wars. But even like the reason why people are mad at Poe is because he took out the fleet destroyer. The ship is a fleet destroyer, and all they have left is a fleet. If the fleet destroyer destroys their fleet, they all lose. It's a game over. Resistance has lost. Rey's the only surviving member, basically. And what happens is everyone's mad at Poe for destroying the fleet destroyer because it costs a lot of lives. And it's kind of annoying because it's like, if they didn't attack then with that plan, then it would have been it's not just a mission failure. If you pull back and retreat, it's not just, you don't just get to regroup. If that ship is a fleet destroyer, it will destroy your fleet. So Rian Johnson probably didn't have to write that part. That's what's confusing. I think they wrote that part in to make sense for why Poe would do it, but they kind of probably should have just made Poe more into an asshole and risk people's lives when he didn't need to, and that would have justified the later scenes. So again, to me, that's why it's so confusing. And also the way they treat Poe, even if he's been deranked, even if he's not in command or in charge anymore, the way they treat him, the way Holdo just won't tell him the plan just because she's mad at him, that doesn't make Holdo smart or in the right. That makes Holdo like a weird woman who's a little too angry, who needs to calm down. She's not a very good leader. That's the problem, is that, and again, they're creating this conflict between her. It's like they had to do that part. That way Poe would be mad enough to do a mutiny. And that's the thing. Like, things happen that seem so out of left field that don't make sense. And you're just, it's weird. Because it's like, yes, this is Star Wars, and you can kind of like ignore certain things. Like, oh, light speed just works this way now. Oh, shields work this way now. But when it comes to like people just acting so super strange and doing things that make no sense, you're just like, what the fuck? Like, that doesn't add up, and that's, for me, that's my problems with 8, is that the scenes involving everyone aside from Rey, Luke, and Kylo Ren are just not that well put together. They're just not very good. And so while a lot of people really like episode 8, and understandably so, I think episode 8 is the most interesting of the 3. It does a lot of things right. Even like the more I think about it, I've been kind of hard on episode 8 lately, and the more I think about it, it does a lot of really cool things correctly. And is it my favorite of the Disney Star Wars movies? No, it's still probably my least favorite no matter what. But sometimes I really hate on it, and other times I'm like, you know what, I gotta stand up for episode 8 because people shit on it all the time, and it's really not as bad as they say. Problem is, it's also not as good as other people say, to the point where it's so good that episode 9 should have followed it. Now here's the thing. Here's my thing. If you are a huge fan of episode 8, and you wanted episode 9 to continue in that direction and do something really interesting, unique, and new for Star Wars, I understand why you're mad about episode 9. I'm going to be completely clear. I'm tired of this discourse where everyone is mad at each other for liking or disliking something. I just try to give perfectly valid reasons for why I don't like episode 8. And if you want to yell at me and say, blah, 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 well, I do like episode 8, but those are my reasons. Those are my problems with it. And you can't just tell me those problems don't exist. I mean, that movie is just kind of a mess, honestly. But it's not a mess in its story writing, and actually it is a mess in its story writing, but it's not a mess in its plot A story writing. It's plot B and it's plot C. The parts of the story that involve Finn and Rose, and the parts of the story that involve Holdo and Poe, those parts are kind of a mess. But it's A story with Luke and Rey and Kylo Ren. Those parts are fantastic. That's all fine. That's all good to me. Now, some people really hate the Luke Skywalker stuff. But you have to also understand where they're coming from, because the reason why they hate that stuff is the same reason why you hate episode 9, because episode 8 doesn't follow their personal vision, just like episode 9 didn't follow yours. So I think we should just be respectful to people who diss on the movies and not get super mad and up in arms at people for having criticisms about the movie. Even though I just said it sucks being a Star Wars fan because of the discourse surrounding it, I think if we just allowed people to express themselves without getting really mad and offended over it, getting offended over a fucking children's movie, then we can really make Star Wars into something greater. One of my least favorite criticisms about episode 9 is that it basically reversed everything from episode 8. That's really frustrating and annoying. Now, if you want to complain that episode 9 is almost 2 movies in one because they set up so much plot to make the climax work, that's fine. That's a legitimate complaint. But I don't think J.J. Abrams did that because he didn't like episode 8 and reversed everything from episode 8. I think it's because episode 8 ended things on such a clean slate. Episode 7 ended things with a perfect setup for the next movie to where we knew exactly where it was going, which didn't work for Rian Johnson because Rian Johnson wanted to make something fresh and different for Star Wars. So he immediately had to do something with Luke to throw everyone off their track, which was perfectly fine for me, in my opinion, because I'm not, even though that's not what I predicted, who cares what I predicted, right? You know, like, at least it's something cool. Like, it's if it's a good movie, you know, 8, good movie with an asterisk, but if it's a good movie for the most part, then that's fine. You know, the stuff with Luke was not the problem, you know, not for me at least, because I can accept the director's vision. And I think it's interesting because, again, I like to think of the movies from the perspective of the characters in the world. It's hard to do that in episode 8, again, because of the way Rian Johnson wanted to direct this film, but either way, episode 9, in my opinion, does not reverse anything from episode 8. In fact, I think episode 8 is even stronger because of episode 9, not just because of stuff like Poe having an attitude problem in episode 9, but the consistency continues from there too. One of my favorite scenes in episode 9 is actually when all the rebel ships come at the very end, when Lando Calrissian calls them all on the radio. The thing is that scene would have been kind of cheesy and stupid bullshit most of the time. And I bet you a lot of people think it is cheesy, stupid bullshit. It's actually pretty good writing, though, because it's a total callback to episode 8. In episode 8, they call for any resistance members who can come join, and nobody comes because nobody can spare anything to help. And it makes that final scene, episode 9, a bit more powerful. Now, to me, it's completely fair and justified to do it in the 9th movie. Some people say the 9th movie didn't earn any of its celebrating moments, and I just completely disagree. Again, the fact that that's a total callback to episode 8, I don't see the issue. And this is my problem here, is that people are too focused on hating 9, and they're not pointing out any of the good stuff that they did right. Another thing is that J.J. Abrams took the whole like Force connection thing with Kylo Ren and Rey and took it to the whole next level. Now, he put sword fights in, and Rian Johnson definitely made a point to not have a single lightsaber clash with another lightsaber in that movie. That did not happen at all in episode 8. Again, here's the thing. Just like I said, there's so many things about 8 that a Star Wars movie has never done before. He did that on purpose, okay? He totally did that on purpose. No lightsabers hit each other at all. That's cool for 8. See, that's a cool thing. But that's what I'm saying. That's why 8 is sort of like a cool standalone film versus being a Star Wars trilogy film. Like, if this was a Star Wars movie, spin-off movie, I think it would have been better. But instead, Rian Johnson got to do the middle part of the trilogy. And I think I think it all worked out. Even though 8 is so different and unique, I think it still all worked out to the point where if you watch all 3 movies, it should be extremely satisfactory. Again, if you are complaining about episode 9 and its big setup, that's more because J.J. Abrams wanted to do something with Palpatine. He didn't have to do anything with Palpatine. He could have made Kylo Ren the main bad guy at the end. But the thing is, here's the fucking thing. Some of you guys might get really fucking mad about Kylo Ren being turned good again. I didn't want Kylo Ren to turn good. In episode 7 at the very end, I was like, damn, he's probably going to turn good at the end. I didn't want him to turn good at the end. I wanted him to die a villain, because I think that would have been a fresher, new thing, and also Darth Vader got redeemed at the end. The only thing is that whenever Kylo Ren was redeemed, it was kind of like, man, like when it was actually happening and Han Solo was back and Harrison Ford was actually in the movie, it was this whole thing. A lot of people have even admitted this is one of the better scenes in the movie that really worked on an emotional level. And it's not just because Harrison Ford and Han Solo, but because of what happened in episode 7. It's because of the chemistry between Harrison Ford and Adam Driver and what they did in episode 7, which was one of my favorite scenes in episode 7. That scene really, really works because of what was set up there. And the reason why you had to do it like that is because in episode 8, again, in episode 8, Rian Johnson, while he may have ended 8 with Kylo staying evil and tricking the audience thinking he would turn good, he literally set up two standards. One, he set up Kylo Ren and Rey fighting side by side, which became another factor in episode 9. They fought together side by side in episode 9, just like they did in 8. But there was another thing. Kylo Ren in episode 8 went to kill his mother, just like he killed his father. But he couldn't pull the trigger. He couldn't do it. And the scene implies that she knew that he was there, because their faces, the camera is showing Leia's face and then Kylo Ren's face. It's going back and forth between the faces. It's implied that he can't kill his mom. He just can't do it. So what does J.J. Abrams do to turn Kylo Ren good? He uses Princess Leia to use the Force to communicate with him one final time, which took the rest of her life energy, which is kind of a cheesy thing to do, but we can say we could say basically that there's, we know that when Luke uses Force projection, he dies, and we can say, well, Leia's not as strong as Luke. Leia was closer to death than Luke, and also Leia's not as good at the Force with Luke, and therefore it took more of her life energy to do. We could say those things, right? And I say she's not as good at the Force. She's probably strong with the Force because it's the same reason why Luke's strong with the Force, but she hasn't been trained as much as Luke, right? Luke did, and oh my god, I love that. Again, Rian Johnson showed Leia using the Force in 8. So because of that, Abrams decided Leia is a full-blown Jedi now. It's because Rian Johnson showed Leia using the Force in 8. That's exactly why. So again, when people say it shits on 8, it literally does not, guys. It fucking does not. You guys are fucking being way too dramatic about this shit. Almost everything about 9, it takes so many elements from 8. I don't know how. Now, J.J. Abrams, he made the movie he wanted to make, and I totally agree. He did not follow in 8's footsteps in some of the ways that it could have happened. And that's why I'm saying, if you guys were mad about the vision of 9, I completely understand, because if what we could have got was something better for you, I totally understand why you don't like 9. That's completely valid in my opinion. But the thing is that you just can't say it shits on 9 or it shits on 8, because it really doesn't. Now, J.J. Abrams totally took things that Rian Johnson set up and he used them. He used what Rian Johnson set up to the point where when you watch all 3, it'll all make sense. Quentin Reviews made a video where he talked about episode 8 and why it's his favorite movie, and why episode 9 is bad because it doesn't do any of the things that it should have followed more in 8's footsteps. And he said he doesn't know how he's going to explain to his kids when they watch 7 and then 8, and then he says, yeah, and 9 is this way because the director didn't like the last director, and it just did things to revoke what 8 did. And I'm just like, it didn't, though. First of all, you could say the same thing about 8 doing that to 7. You could say that 8 took what 7 did and revoked all of it. At the end of the day, a lot of people were saying that. A lot of people were saying that 7 set up a lot of mystery and 8 just shit all over the whole thing. To me, that would have been really jarring and weird if 9 did follow in 8's footsteps, and then we literally never got an answer for Rey's parents. And we literally, how many people would have been mad? Basically, here's the thing. 9, there's no way 9 could have done successful because 8 and 7 are kind of really weird and disjointed movies. They're not they don't flow into each other that perfectly. Some people are saying, yeah, this trilogy is bad now because of 9, and other people are saying the trilogy is bad because 8 was such a clusterfuck that 9 couldn't have been good. And I'm here to say all 3 movies are good for very different reasons, which is kind of weird for a trilogy. However, we get 3 movies that are all very, very good. So what's the problem, Again, 8, not as good, in my opinion. But because it's so interesting and different, and because the cinematography is so cool and well done, and because Kylo Ren is developed in such a fantastic way in that movie, I still really, really like that movie. And yeah, so while 8 was kind of like a departure, a side story for this trilogy, 9 literally makes me like it more, guys. I'm not even joking. 9 literally makes me like episode 8 way, way more. You know, this is coming from someone who really didn't like 8 that much. 9 makes me really love 8. Because, again, they flow together so perfectly, in my opinion. My problems with 9 involve Palpatine being there in the first place. You know, why the fuck is he even in the movie? Like, could they not come up with any other idea? However, it kind of works because Rey is related to Palpatine, but because they've never even met before, it's kind of like, it's not nearly as emotional as when Luke finds out Vader's related to him. It's more like Rey's like, ah, shit. You know? It's like, ah, fuck. That's why. It just kind of, it basically turns Rey's big, giant twist plot reveal into something that's more like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know? Which, you know, could it have been better? Maybe. But they did the same thing with Snoke. Palpatine's like, I'm the one who did all of that. And you're just kind of like, oh, okay. Like, you're not exactly like, whoa, that makes so much sense. It's more like, okay, that makes sense. You know, it's just like, it just kind of slightly works, right? Like, I'm not here to say 9 is the best fucking movie ever made. You know, 7 is probably still my favorite because the adventure in 7 is so good, but the adventure in 9 is so good. Like, it's, you can't say 9 is a dog shit movie. Like, people who say that, they're just really upsetting me because 9 as a movie, if you're being objective about it, it's really fun. It's really cool. The scenes are just, you know, they're awesome, you know? And I love the chemistry between the characters so much, you know, and that's really what's most important to me is the characters. You know, they're really well done. Like, it's to the point where you can probably write your own movie based off Rey, Finn, and Poe because we know so much about them. And by the time Ben Solo, you know, Kylo Ren turns to Ben Solo again, it's really, really cool. Like, again, I thought I didn't want that. I thought it'd be so cheesy and corny, but the way it's set up in 9 kind of makes it like it had to be this way. Like, it just had to be this way. It makes the most sense. And it's also really cool seeing Ben finally using the lightsaber of Luke Skywalker, and while Rey's using the lightsaber of Princess Leia. It's really cool to see them fighting that way. You know, they're both using the lightsabers of their masters. You know, when you think about it, like, there's a lot of really cool, well done shit in these movies. And you know, I love at the end that Rey buries the 2 lightsabers, and it's like, yeah, that's respectful. And then she just pulls out really quick, like, her own lightsaber, which is her staff, and it turns yellow. And a lot of people are like, "Ooh, that was just a fan theory. They just put it to make the fans happy." And it's like, first of all, there's nothing wrong with that because the reason why the fans came up with that is because it seemed like a cool idea. The fact that they did that is because it's a good idea, okay? So pleasing the fans in that way is not automatically bad because the fans called it. It's still, if it's still fucking cool, then it's fucking cool, okay? And it also makes sense, and also it's the first on-screen yellow lightsaber. We only get yellow lightsabers in, like, the cartoons and the comics, and so it's really cool to see this. The only thing that sucks is it's kind of left up to your imagination about what Rey does with it, but you know what, like, it's still really, really cool to see she actually, like, made her own, and she's becoming more of a Jedi. She's kind of taken on the role that Luke once had, and, you know, I think right now people are being such fucking haters. Again, when Quentin Reviews says, like, oh, okay, I don't want to do a stupid voice for Quentin Reviews because I actually have, like, super huge amounts of respect for Quentin, and a lot of the points he made was actually pretty good because there were things I disagreed with too. Like, I don't like everything about episode 9, but when it comes to, like, when he's saying, like, I don't know how I'm going to show my kids these movies because the directors were just fighting back and forth. I disagree, man. I think that over time people are going to, I think if you put yourself in the perspective, if you didn't have to wait like 2 years for each movie, it's going to change exactly how you feel about it. You know, like, people who marathon 4, 5, and 6 have a different perspective on those movies than the people who had to wait 3 years in between every movie. You know, we are going to have a very different perspective than people in the future. But you know what? This is possibly the last trilogy in the book end to the Skywalker saga. Possibly there's going to be no more, and the rest will all be side stories or movies that do contain the characters, but it's, you know, at a different timeline or whatever. sort of like how Solo did, or kind of like how some of the characters showed up in Rogue One. Um, I think that as far as this trilogy goes, though, like I think once you watch 7, 8, and 9 together, they'll be completely perfect. Like they'll be completely exactly how they're supposed to be. So, I mean, to me, I don't understand the fuss. I don't understand the complaints. I still really like 9. I kind of want to go see it again because honestly, it makes me emotional how happy it makes me and how good it is. Um, yeah, I mean, to me, I fucking love it, man. And again, like I said, it makes me like 8 more. So I don't understand. Like, I'm being as critical and objective as I possibly can be, and I think other people are just being very biased. I'm not saying, like, I know that's kind of like a cop out thing to say, but what I'm saying is, a lot of the complaints I've heard just involve people saying how 9 doesn't follow 8 well enough, or how the trilogy is already, it's just fucked because 8 fucked things so much that 9 couldn't be a good movie. Now 9 sucks. You guys, just because story and message isn't the only thing that makes a good movie, okay? The message of 9 to me was more about like never giving up, never backing down, and doing, it's also about facing your fears, facing the darkness, which is kind of like what all Star Wars is always about. But it's about you're not being afraid of confrontation and conflict. And it's also, to me, about even if you come from nothing or you come from something bad, you come from a bad background, you can still be who you want to be. Being a Skywalker, me and my friend were talking about this. Quentin said that episode 9 is basically just episode 6 again, meaning the moral and the messages from episode 9 are the same as 6. And for me, yes, 6 was about redemption, but, Rey doesn't need to be redeemed. Rey is not a character who needs redemption. 6 is about redemption because Darth Vader needs redemption, right? That's so obvious. Everyone knows this. At the end of 6, actually, at the beginning of 6, Luke is not really that upset about being a Skywalker because he knows something about Skywalkers. He knows that his father, Anakin, was a brave and courageous and good person at one point, because he knows that Anakin is a legend. He knows because Obi-Wan told him about Anakin Skywalker being a good Jedi who fought beside him in the Clone Wars. And Darth Vader killed Anakin Skywalker, and to Obi-Wan, that's an accurate statement. Of course, he could have expanded upon that, but it's an accurate statement to a degree. And so Luke knew that deep down in there was a good human in there. He just needed to bring him back out. And the thing is that movie is not about Luke's redemption. It's not about Luke. It's about Luke helping his father. You see, in episode 4 and 5, Luke is this character who is kind of flawed. He's kind of a whiner, kind of a baby, but he does want to go on a big adventure, and he has a lot to learn. He's very naive and immature. He learns really hard and really fast what the real world is like, thanks to being around people like Han Solo, and then getting involved in a war. He wants to be a big-time war hero, but in episode 5, Yoda says, no. That doesn't even matter, bro. What matters is the world all around us. Then we get to episode 6, and Luke at this point is a much wiser man, a much smarter man. He is not even upset or fazed at all. Luke doesn't have a character arc in episode 6. He's a flat arc character. He is a man with a mission, okay? He literally is he doesn't believe a lie that needs to be corrected by the truth. Luke in episode 6 knows the truth. However, he has to confront someone who knows a lie, who needs to be brought back by the truth. That's what a flat arc character does. If you don't know what a flat arc character is, think of Goku from Dragon Ball Z. See, Goku doesn't really learn lessons that often. He's kind of just already right. And he hangs out with people who need to learn something. So Piccolo, for example, he changed a lot hanging around Goku. Gohan, for example, kind of reached into who he really needed to be to grow up for his coming of age story thanks to his father Goku. And Vegeta, who was probably the biggest project Goku had, Vegeta went from being, a big bad time, big, bad guy, big baddie, who only cared about himself, to being someone who found what he really was passionate about in this world, and also finding love for others and letting people inside. And it's what made Vegeta go from hating Kakarot and always wanting to beat him to turning Goku, more into his rival and a friend. And that's why in Dragon Ball Super, Vegeta's not always trying to kill Goku like he was in Dragon Ball Z. Because Vegeta already learned his character arc story. So in episode 6, Luke already has learned his morals from episode 5. He's done. His character is done. Episode 5 has this great, awesome moment, and now it's about Vader. This is called good story writing and good character dynamics. Now that Vader has exposed himself to Luke and saying, I'm your father, because Luke is a wise, smart Jedi now, he knows what he needs to do. Now, episode 9 is not like that at all. Yes, Rey converts Kylo Ren, but they don't convert Palpatine, obviously. However, Kylo Ren is the one who tells Rey the truth, that she belongs to the dark side like he does. And, that's the lie Kylo Ren believes, that he's stuck in the dark side. So yes, Kylo Ren does get redeemed like Rey did, but Kylo Ren is not the main character. Rey is the main character, and unlike Luke, Rey does have a character arc. Rey is drifting towards the dark side, which again is something that's set up in episode 8. In episode 7, Kylo Ren is bouncing back and forth. Rian Johnson took that and ran with it in episode 8. Kylo Ren is bouncing around between light and bad, good and dark. He's doing that. And Rey is kind of bouncing even further now. Luke even says, you went right to the dark. You didn't even run. You didn't even try to run from the dark. You went right to it. Because Rey has some dark side power, dark side-ness inside of her, right? And any Jedi can be dark, right? But the fact that she's related to Palpatine does not help her situation. Especially if, because dark side energy, we could say, it could be possibly passed down by genes. It's kind of unclear. But any Jedi who's very strong with the Force, it's the same way. Like, it passes down with them. So maybe Palpatine, is a reason why she's so strong with the Force. And maybe that's why she's having conflicts with the dark. So, in my opinion, 9 is about her redeeming herself for herself. Her proving herself to herself, which is a lesson that Luke didn't have to learn. Luke already knew that because he's a wise Jedi, he kind of already knew, no. I am me, and my father can be a good person. Rey's different because Palpatine is the most sinister person in a long, long time. He's behind a lot of bullshit that's been going on. And also, because Palpatine is in this last movie, it kind of connects the prequels and original trilogy more closely than these other movies, which would have basically been their own thing that have nothing to do with the Skywalker saga had Palpatine not been back. So again, in my opinion, bringing Palpatine back is actually kind of smart when you think about it that way. It's just he wasn't really set up properly, and also it kind of was like almost impossible for him to be alive, kind of made no sense. But I mean, if they have Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber after it was lost on Bespin, Cloud City, then I mean, like, I guess we can do this too, Also, if Darth Maul can come back to life, if, then I guess anyone can do that shit, it doesn't really matter. I think maybe the dark side, Darth Maul survived on his pure hatred. His pure hatred is part of what kept him alive, right? So we could say the same thing for Sidious. We could say that he wasn't quite completely dead yet. Okay, we could totally say that. It's kind of a cop-out. And it's kind of, some people kind of wanted Palpatine to be definitively dead back then, but we can kind of say that, like, he died, and he does seem kind of zombified. So we could say that, like, he's, like, not really alive, and because instead of being a Force ghost, maybe people on the dark side can, like, keep themselves alive, and I bet you the comics and books will explain this further, right? Either way, that's not what I want to get hung up on right now, but the point is that when you find out your father, you found out Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker. You have two ways to take this. You can say this whole thing's a lie, or you can say no, no. Anakin was cool. He fell. He stumbled. I can bring him back to being a good guy again. That's the two ways you can take it, and Luke chose the second way. When it comes to Palpatine, he never did anything good. He's always been bad. He's always been a horrible, horrible person, and he's one of the most powerful and sinister Sith of all time. So powerful and so greedy that he can even escape death and still manipulate the whole world from the shadows, just like he was doing in the prequels. And Rey, being related to him, makes her more important in the Skywalker saga. And the fact that, again, like I said, because he's so evil, it kind of makes her have more of a conflict, more than Luke would have had, because she can't just say, oh, well, I can redeem Palpatine, and that kind of, shows whatever. No, 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 no. You can't. Being a Palpatine is not the same as being a Skywalker. So her lesson is a lot different. Her lesson is getting away from the darkness and choosing the light side, which is not really a story that we've actually explored much in the movies. Definitely explored that in the side stuff, right? But in the movies, there's not really a character who is like fearing the dark side and being overcome by the dark side and then snaps out of it and stays good, right? There's always people who go to the dark side completely and then they're redeemed, but we never have a character like that with Rey. And I think that's more interesting for her because it helps her stand. Again, the more I think about it and talk about it, the more I just end up loving this movie and loving the decisions they've done. So it kind of makes Rey into this character who's really interesting for that reason. And because she's a Palpatine, I think that makes it more interesting too. She's the daughter of, or granddaughter of Palpatine. And I think that's kind of important. Now, at the end of the movie, this is so super controversial when she calls herself a Skywalker. I don't think they needed to do that, but I mean, calling herself a Palpatine is kind of weird. But also, to be completely fair, Palpatine used his Force powers to create Anakin inside of his mom, so that's why Anakin didn't have a father. So Palpatine like kind of made a pregnant woman with his Force powers. This is only explained in the comics. I know it's not explained in the movies. But basically in the movies, Palpatine says that Darth Plagueis could create life, and his student learned that power, and then Palpatine is that student. So yeah, so in a way, she's kind of related to the Skywalkers, but at the same time, I've always taken it as while Palpatine used the Force to create a child, he's not exactly the father, and his DNA is not really a part of Anakin. And the DNA just kind of came from something else, I guess, because it's the Force. I never really took it as that's Palpatine's DNA. That's kind of weird, But yeah, so it's not exactly appropriate for her to call herself a Skywalker, but it's kind of appropriate when in the sense of she's never had a family. She really didn't know her parents very well, so she was kind of grew up on her own. She has no family. Her family was Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Kylo Ren. That's her family. Oh, and Chewbacca, of course. That's her family. You could also argue that Finn is a part of her family too. They do kind of have like a brotherly relationship, brother-sister relationship. And they are like best friends. I know some people want relationship stuff to happen. Well, it didn't quite happen in the movie, so if that's what you want to write for your fan fiction, I would believe it if you guys wrote it compellingly enough. Yeah, so Rey in this movie, and Rey in the entire trilogy, like she's kind of found a home and left her home thanks to people like Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Princess Leia. And she even was really close with Ben Solo. So her kind of saying, her adopting the Skywalker name, while you guys might call it cheesy, again, to me, it actually makes perfect sense when you really think about it. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying the discourse sucks about this movie because I can explain a lot of this stuff, and a lot of stuff I'm just realizing while talking about it out loud. And it all kind of checks out and makes sense to me. And I've been saying this for a while. Like, I don't see the problems. Like, 9 takes what 8 did. 9 does follow in 8's footsteps. the vision of 8 might not be correct, but it follows in 8's footsteps. It really does not shit all over 8. Even the iconic scene where she throws her lightsaber and Luke catches it, you guys might say it's a jab at 8, but really it's actually showing Luke's character growth. Again, this is using 8 appropriately. I really want Rian Johnson to make a statement saying, guys, it's not about Johnson versus Abrams. He did a good job. 9's a good movie. But he kind of said something instead that you shouldn't give the fans what they want just because they ask for it. You should give them something that challenges them, which kind of fucking sucks. I wish he didn't say that, but then again, I wish Luke never said that he didn't like the character he had in 8. You know, I don't think Mark Hamill should have said Luke was a badly written character in 8, and then he kind of took it back. I want Rian Johnson to make a statement like that because I think people are just so weirdly up in arms. To me, the more you talk about it in a nerd fashion, the more you gain from it, you know. And again, I just wish the discourse was a little bit different because to me, it all is. The more I think about it, the more I love it. Like literally, the trilogy actually, it's true. It doesn't have a connected vision in the sense that the prequels did, but the original trilogy, they kind of made it up as they went, and that's how this one is. And it's a little bit more disjointed than the original trilogy because at least in episode 5, George had some plans for what he wanted to do in episode 6, and it feels very connected because of it. Episode 9, I think, took everything they did from 8 and brought it all together really well. I think it's actually a very well done movie. And because the action sequences are really fun and cool, I have no problem with it. So in my opinion, I don't understand the hate. I don't understand the problems. I think it's beautiful. However, I do understand it's early, and a lot of people didn't like 8 right off the bat, so I understand if you don't like it right away. You need time to think about it and meditate on it. I also understand, again, if you don't like all the choices they did, maybe involving Princess Leia and the way they used her lines. Maybe you didn't like how they did Palpatine being back. Maybe you didn't like how the movie is there's so much jam-packed into it because it's almost it has to have a bunch of information to set up the climax that it takes a big chunk of the movie is like this big runaround mess. I understand if you don't like that pacing, and I agree. The beginning of the movie isn't as good as the middle, but when you really think about everything, I think it turns out to be a pretty good movie. And I think people are being a little bit dramatic. I mean, to me, I'm not gonna back down on this. I can't see any reason why I would change my mind about how this isn't a good trilogy that doesn't flow together. I think the sequel trilogy went perfectly, and basically all I have to say is I'm fucking waiting for Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. I can't wait to play all 9 movies in Lego form and watch how they all connect together. I can't wait, man. It's gonna be fucking awesome. You know, I'm gonna love playing episode 7, 8, and 9, and I'm also gonna really enjoy the original trilogy and the prequels. I hope you can play them in any order, just like the Lego Star Wars old games. Like you can just play them in any order, and I'll probably just play them in the actual release order instead of the chronological order because that's more fun. Or maybe I'll rebeat the game a second time and do it all in chronological order or whatever, you know. Or maybe I'll just pick my favorite movies and just start there because I just want to play my favorite movies, you know. So either way, it's super exciting and fun. You can tell I'm getting happy talking about Lego Star Wars. But yeah, dude, in my opinion, I really enjoyed episode 9. And I think the whole trilogy tied up really nicely, and I love it. I love Star Wars, man. Being a Star Wars fan, it sucks because of the fucking discourse going around that happens at the end. Anytime a movie comes out, no one's allowed to be happy. We all have to be mad, but I'm still smiling. I'm still smiling right now as I'm talking because I love it, man. I love it. I think it's fucking awesome, and I think I made good points as to why I like it, and I mainly made this video because I was talking about this with my coworkers today about why 8 is kind of like it just hits you over the head with what it's trying to say. And my main point is when I watch a movie, I don't like to think about how it's meta, how it relates to other movies, how this movie's different from another movie, okay? Which is all I can think about when I watch 8. Instead, I like to think about what the characters are feeling and what it would be like to live in this world. And Star Wars is perfect for that. And that's why, again, I think 8 is a really good standalone film. And I think it's really interesting. And because I think it flows nicely into 9, and because it takes a lot of ideas from 7 and expands upon them, mainly with Rey and Kylo Ren, I can't hate the movie. I think it's a good movie. I just don't like some of the slower scenes that are really boring. But either way, at the end of the day, I like all three movies, man. I really do. And my order of favorites, you guys are gonna hate me for this, but 9 is my favorite, then 7, and then 8. And I know, like, it's like, oh, he likes 9 and 7. Well, one of them has to be in last place, and it's gonna be 8. I'm sorry. I don't like the pacing. I don't like what they did with Finn and Rose. I don't like what they did with Poe and Holdo. But you know what? I still like the movie, and so I wish you guys could criticize these movies and still like them too. So, like, again, you can say, oh, 7 was good, but it was too safe and too much like the original. Okay, that's fine. That's not even incorrect. That's a totally fair and objective opinion, man. But just don't say the whole movie's shit just because of that one bad thing, okay? Because you can't argue with the cinematography, the great character chemistry, the really good like action sequences, the really cool set pieces with the locations and the sets they built, and not even, and the way the story flows together, again, to me, it flows together nice. So you can say you don't like 8 for the reasons I don't like 8, but I still like the movie overall. And you can complain about 9, because 9 is kind of weirdly rushed. The stuff with Leia and Palpatine is kind of weird, but you know what? Whatever, It's like a lot of people make fun of how Leia flies in 8, and that's kind of a valid criticism. It looks corny. But does that make 8 a bad movie just because of the way Leia flies around? No, it doesn't. But, it's a movie. It's allowed to have flaws. It doesn't have to be a perfect movie. How many perfect movies have you actually seen, Yes, those are some of the best movies of all time, but, whatever. Star Wars isn't always perfect. I mean, look at the entirety of the prequel trilogy. Look at episode 6. Look at the edits that have done into the original trilogy in general. Star Wars is a flawed franchise that used to be made for everyone, and now it's mostly for nerds. I don't care. At the end of the day, I fucking love Star Wars, man, and these movies are awesome. So I'm going to leave it at that, man. I'm going to end this video here, and I hope that people who like 9 can find some comfort in some of the things I'm saying, because it sucks. I hate watching YouTube videos right now because I feel like everyone is saying stuff in the wrong direction. They're all being so over dramatic about how bad this movie is. And it's just such a pain in the ass, man. It sucks so bad. I think it's so reactionary. I think people think they're smarter or more clever than they actually are. I think people need to humble themselves and take a step back and try to look at things in a different perspective, before you just jump the gun with your pure anger. However, I kind of understand that's a natural response. At the same time, I'm just tired of people getting mad at each other for liking or not liking something. Like, let people have their opinions, It's just that I don't like when the opinions are something that's just, completely incorrect, or something that is not true for someone else. Like, for example, it's true you might not like something because the vision is off from what you wanted. A lot of people didn't like 8 because it didn't reveal who Rey's parents were and all that stuff. But I kind of try to tell people, hey, it doesn't matter because in 9 we'll probably know. And I was right. So to me, it's like, okay, that makes 8 better, because 8 kind of exists to throw people off the trail now. And that's a good thing because it, helps 8 stand out to be more interesting. So to me, that's all good. Like, again, I think this trilogy is good, and I think 9 makes 8 better. I really do. I really think that when you watch 8, there's going to be scenes where you can gain more because of 9. And that's something, again, a lot of people have been saying this. Almost everyone I've watched who reviewed this video said when you watch 7 and 8, it's probably going to be bad now because 9 was bad. And it's like, no. You will still find things that make sense in all 3 movies. Like, watching all 3 movies and then watching all 3 again will actually help them all click and make more sense. To me, it's undeniable. It's right there staring you in the face, So I don't know, man. But to me, I think these movies weren't a shit show. I think they weren't super profound. I don't think these are the best movies of all time, but they were good. They weren't bad. Saying that, I can't say they're bad. They were just fine movies. Now, did you want them to be like the greatest things ever? No, but the Marvel movies really aren't either, But Infinity War and Endgame were pretty cool, and that's just how it is, man. Like, yes, these movies are not saying the most profound things ever. They're kind of made for a general audience, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. One thing is that I feel like a lot of people who talk about 8 so much are trying to take it into an intellectual perspective. And then when they talk about 9, they're like, oh, nine's not nearly as intellectual as 8 is. And it's like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, oh, just because I like Star Wars and it's not as intellectual as other films, now I don't like other intellectual films. Oh, now everything I like is stupid. I only listen to pop music but only the dumb pop music, not the good. I only listen to dumb stuff. I only read dumb books. Everything I like is just fucking filler, butter, mindless bullshit. No, that's not true. I still like things that have profound messages. I just also like Star Wars. So sue me. I like a fucking franchise that has big robots and spaceships and laser guns and swords made of pure lasers that have different colors. Like, oh, and in like a world that's like basically a Western that also exists in a world with like these Buddhist monks at the same time, and they're like space wizards and bounty hunters, and I'm sorry I like something that's kind of cool and has cool ideas with really good character designs, like the stormtroopers and the Mandalorian armor and the Darth Maul and the Sith robes and all that stuff, and Darth Vader in general looking like a space Black Knight. Oh, I'm sorry I like those things that look cool, because things that look cool aren't cool unless they have really super profound messages behind them that change your whole entire life. Even though I'm fucking nearly 30 now and I've seen so many things, and my mind's been blown so many times that I can't keep expecting every single thing to fucking change my entire perspective on life altogether forever. Oh, I'm so sorry that I like fucking things that look cool. Oh, I'm so sorry that I don't mind when a moral message is something I've seen before. Oh, I'm sorry that a message is something that's kind of basic that you could have thought up on your own and didn't like mind fuck you. Oh, I'm so sorry for Star Wars. And that it's corny when Rey says she's a Skywalker, because it's meaningful for her character, but not that clever, and it makes the name kind of cheesy. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I like it. Sue me. I'll see you guys on the next one.